Hello, and a very, very happy Christmas to you. Here I am bearing my present for you in the form of this conversation, one that is very important for all the future episodes to come. Although a conversation might not exactly qualify as a gift in the traditional sense of the word, but you'll see by the end of this episode that this conversation is going to be a non traditional but a thoughtful gift, one that I promise will keep on giving. The theme for today's conversation is the global north and global south divide. I'm Chani Srivastav, and you're listening to the Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast. Let's get into it. Before you tune out thinking that this has got nothing to do with you, take a beat and think about the presents you bought for your loved ones or the ones under the Christmas tree that you're about to receive this holiday season, or for that matter, on any occasion throughout the year that you might be celebrating. And now let's break down those gifts into the broad categories that we all end up buying from. And let's stick to the top three popular categories for consumption globally, which are clothes and accessories, electronics, and food. So let's break this down even further. Think about the cashmere sweater or the pure leather handbag that you received or are about to receive. Were they made in a factory overseas where workers might face issues like low wages and unsafe working conditions? Then let's take a moment for our beloved phones, tablets, laptops, and all your tech. Have you ever looked into what goes into manufacturing these products? Do they contain minerals mined in conflict zones where communities have historically suffered from exploitation and environmental degradation? And finally, let's take a look at our beautiful festive tables full of food. Did you ever look up their food miles to check how much of it was transported over long distances to reach your table? And how do they contribute to greenhouse gas emissions by potentially displacing local farmers and their local produce? These are just a few examples of how our everyday choices are interconnected with our collective reality. And this is not to guilt trip anybody by sending you into a research spiral that feeds your anxiety. And to my utter horror, also the climate doom algorithm on your device. We definitely do not want to activate that algorithm at this time. But these examples are just here to show you that if you think that there are certain global issues that don't touch you directly, then you might be mistaken. And rather than feeling despondent or overwhelmed about this fact, especially in the holiday season, we can at least arm ourselves with knowledge that'll help with our diagnosis better. Plus, once we have the right diagnosis, we know we're on the right path to start thinking about developing the right course of action. So, today, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I want you to just smooth into this conversation. Do not let it hamper the festive spirit at all. Just treat this as the one last thought provoking conversation for this year before we wind down 2024 and gear up to welcome 2025. The other day, I was talking to this sustainability expert who asked me the aim of my podcast. I understood where he was coming from. He has known me as a sustainability strategist who is also an IP and tech lawyer. And perhaps he was expecting a different angle to the podcast already. He was probably expecting some tangible step by step solutions to sustainability issues in various industries that I work in, and also like a complex breakdown of upcoming legal and regulatory requirements that he usually talks to me about. But till now, all he saw or heard were conversations around critical thinking, positive social, environmental, cultural impact, entrepreneurship, and of course, the interconnectedness of all things. I thought about this and I explained to him that as a lawyer and a strategist, I experienced this time and time again that without a change in mindset, no strategies or solutions can be implemented for a positive impact in the longer run. So I guess I am in the business of bringing about a shift in the prevailing mindset, along with suggesting a new way of looking at how we do business and also lead our lives. It is my humble attempt at showing the world that things can be better if we all learn how to want better. But thinking about this, it comes to mind that better is such a subjective word. What is better for somebody sitting in Manila in the Philippines might be completely different than what is better for somebody in San Francisco in the United States. So that conversation planted the germ for today's episode in my mind, and I thought that it is imperative to understand this difference in the definition of what is better for somebody in one part of the world versus what is better for somebody in the exact opposite part of the world. Adding further to my thought, around the same time, I also happened to watch this Netflix documentary called Buy Now that vividly illustrates consumer culture of our times. It talks about the constant advertising, especially of the buy now and pay later mentality, that has played a significant role in exasperating certain divisions in the world. The documentary exposes the dark side of fast fashion in particular, highlighting the rampant issues in the fashion industry, such as the exploitation of workers in the developing countries, the environmental devastation caused by textile production, and the messaging for consumerism that fuels this kind of unsustainable system that exists in the industry today. It brilliantly and of course disturbingly exposes how this relentless cycle of consumption is linked to environmental destruction and social inequality across the globe. Holiday shopping or otherwise, I would highly recommend this documentary for anybody who would like to become more mindful about their consumption in general. You can find the link to this documentary in the description box below this episode. And once you've watched it, I would love to know your thoughts on it because it is one of those things that you can't unsee at all once you see it. It shifts your perception of your everyday reality. So the next time you see a big 50% flat sale board in front of your favorite fast fashion store, you're going to be compelled to think about the factories and developing countries with low wages and poor working conditions that are producing these clothes for you that you're now going to buy at 50% flat prices. It's going to change the way you look at your phone, your tablets, and all the tech that you possess. And you should not be surprised when you start thinking about this divide as it starts seeping into your daily life. For instance, in my case, God knows I'm a big morning cup of joe person. And even as I browse the internet to find my next batch of coffee beans, I can't help but pay heed to the small voice at the back of my head that nudges me to think about the small farmers in countries like Colombia, Ethiopia, who are often facing low prices and struggling to make a living. So I can make a more mindful decision when I buy those coffee beans. The fact is that the products we consume, the policies that govern our world, and the challenges we face are all interconnected with the economic and social disparities between the global north and the global south. It is a complex and multifaceted issue with profound social, economic, and political implications. And understanding its history and contemporary realities is crucial for building a more just and equitable world. So let's talk a little bit about the origins of these terms. In the mid 20th century, when the terms global north and global south emerged, it was done so to replace the more hierarchical terms like the first world and the third world. While not strictly geographical, they generally refer to developed and developing countries respectively. The North encompasses regions like North America, Europe, and parts of Asia that are characterized by high levels of economic development, technological advancement, and political stability, whereas the Global South, encompassing Africa, Latin America, and most of Asia, typically experiences low incomes, higher poverty rates, and limited access to resources and opportunities. This divide has extremely deep and complex historical roots. Colonialism, where Western powers exploited resources and labor from other continents, left lasting legacies of economic and political inequality, as we all know. And theories like the dependence theory argue that these historical power imbalances continue to shape the global economic order to this date, with the global south remaining largely dependent on the global north. The Cold War then further solidified this division, with the world being divided into various ideological blocs. But the post Cold War era started seeing new challenges in this field. Globalization, while offering opportunities, somehow also exasperated inequalities. While some researchers argue that globalization has lifted millions out of poverty in the global south, others contend that it has primarily benefited the global north, leading to increased wealth disparities. The concept of global south and what it stands for has also evolved with time. Today, it's no longer just about economic disparities, but also about political and cultural power dynamics. If you'd recall, we had spoken about the Sustainable Development Goals in a previous episode that I'm going to link for you below this episode. They are a bold roadmap laid out by the United Nations promising a future where poverty is eradicated and our planet thrives and prosperity is shared by all. In our context, let's look at the last goal, SDG 17, which calls for partnerships for achieving these goals. This goal, on the surface, champions the spirit of global unity, urging collaboration between nations, businesses, and civil society organizations to achieve the other 16 ambitious targets. It paints a picture of a world where everyone, regardless of their background or location, plays a vital role in shaping a sustainable future for everyone. But as we have seen in the last few years, especially during and after the pandemic, the reality of achieving these partnerships, especially in a world which is deeply divided, even ideologically, is far from utopian. The stark reality is that the globe is often categorized into two distinct spheres that transcend mere geographical boundaries. It's a complex interplay of power dynamics, resource disparities, and also unequal distribution of influence that shapes the global landscape. In terms of partnerships, the global north, with its historical advantages and accumulated wealth, often holds a dominant position in international decision making processes, while the global south, grappling with challenges like poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation, often finds itself marginalized and lacking the resources as well as the agency to fully participate in crucial partnerships. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development emphasizes the need for a multi stakeholder partnership involving governments, businesses, and NGOs as they are crucial for real progress. But a study undertaken in 2021 makes a relevant point by highlighting the urgency of addressing this global north and global south divide in SDG partnerships. Researchers of the study observed that there has been very little research published on this kind of partnership, and this is the first study to explore the extent to which partners from the northern and the southern countries are involved in these partnerships along with their focus. This study identifies that involvement is unequally distributed and may perpetuate the north south divide in countries in terms of their resources, including access to data and scientific capacities. The data in the study revealed that partnerships involving low income countries prioritize goals like poverty reduction, hunger eradication, health, and gender equality, which are mainly restricted to SDGs 1, 2, 3, and 5, and that stand in stark contrast with partnerships dominated by higher income countries, which may not prioritize these goals as strongly as the global south countries do. It also identified regional patterns in partnerships, specifically the rise of the South South cooperation, where countries in the global South strategically collaborate on development and political issues that is now challenging the traditional dominance of the global North. Over the last 2 decades, as many of you would know, China has emerged as a key player in the South South cooperation through its development initiatives, including development finance and recent support for renewable energy, which obviously has the potential to tip the dominance scale even more heavily towards the global south. A recent article published by Carnegie Endowment emphasizes the need to recognize the diversity within the global south and avoid generalizations that undermine their agency and hinder constructive dialogue. Treating the global south as a homogeneous bloc disregards their unique agency and hinders constructive dialogue between the global north and the global south. The authors suggest that instead of viewing the global south as a rigid homogeneous category, it's more beneficial to see it as a guiding principle for creating a fairer international system. Understanding the historical context of anti colonial movements helps policymakers in the global north better grasp the perspectives and priorities of many countries in the global south. For our purposes, as we get more granular in this coming year about this issue, I would implore you to understand and remember that for many in the world, the primary division remains between the powerful North and the marginalized South, and not necessarily between democracies and autocracies. This understanding will come in handy when we speak about this divide and how it shows up in various industries and sectors across the globe, and how we, as individuals, can play a pivotal part in bridging the gap. If you didn't before, I bet now you are certainly beginning to feel a little bit overwhelmed and anxious about this divide, our future, and what have you. And I understand that hearing all of this, especially on Christmas, is just like watching the news or hearing people rabble rouse about our impending doom over dinner tables in one way or the other. The ice caps are melting, the carbon emissions are rising, our air quality is poorer, there are microplastics everywhere on this table, and now you can't even drink your coffee in peace without feeling guilty and responsible for something, even if you don't know what you're responsible for. How is this conversation ever going to offer any solution if it keeps going this way? What are we to do now, now that this diagnostic part of our brain is unlocked? Well, even though I'm getting you to tap into that side of your psyche, I assure you that this podcast is where you come to when you want to replace the doom content with something more positive on the internet. Obviously, right after making this lofty claim of bringing about a mindset shift to look at our circumstances in a renewed light, I can't just go without giving you some relief. Keeping the fire of liberal arts values alive, let me ease this conversation's tempo a bit with a literary interjection. Faiz Ahmed Faiz, for those of you who don't know, was one of the most celebrated, popular, and influential Urdu writers of his time. He was a part of the progressive writers movement, which sought to inspire people through their writings, advocating equality among all humans, attacking social injustice, and also backwardness in the society as it existed at that time. The writers of this movement were instrumental in the freedom movement of the 30s and the 40s in pre partition India. So, as the progressive writers had unanimously decided to dedicate their pens solely to generate political awareness and mobilize the masses, Faiz too wrote his first political poem that addresses his beloved and overrules personal love for the passion of the miseries and turmoils faced by the people before partition in 1947. Most of you who are familiar with his work or with his music from the subcontinent would know the nazm or the poem I'm referring to. Mujhse pehli si mohabbat mere mehboob na mang. From adorning praises of his beloved and fantasies of reunion, Faiz transitions in this poem to relating to the world's sad social circumstances. He integrates the pivotal issues of hunger, poverty, diseases, violence, and the petty criminal workings that plague the society. I came across an interesting piece of research that I'm linking for you below that draws parallels with the approaches of Faiz and Percy B. Shelley, the 18th century English romantic poet who existed in a different time. Although from a different era, Shelley, just like Faiz, was an idealist and a social reformist. One of his sonnets, England in 1819, opens with an outlook of distaste for the monarchy and the ruling class, who survive on the toils of the common man. I'd like you to notice the universality in the thought processes here, as both poets and their creative works are time, circumstances, and nations apart. Both Faiz and Shelley appear to be disillusioned by the governing organization of their country and inspire revolt and dissidence. Both detail the plight and poverty of the proletariat. Both champion social change. They are both idealists and reformers as they appear to be committed towards social altruism. And in our times, As we grapple with challenges of climate change, social inequality, and political polarization, we must give ourselves the music that we need for that much needed release and relief by drawing inspiration from the example of Faiz and Shelley. Their lives and works remind us that we have a responsibility to use our voices and our talents to make the world a better place. Just start getting involved, whether it's something super local or something very global. Getting involved is the best way to start feeling better about your situation. Knowing you're not alone is such a core human need. And we don't have many places to get that feeling in today's society, and especially on the internet. We can educate ourselves about the issues that matter to us, engage in meaningful conversation with others, and take action to create a more just and equitable society. Just as Fairs and Shelley did, we can merge our personal struggles, anxieties, and concerns with a larger cause to transform our pain and anger into a force for positive change. We can use our art, our words, our profession, and our actions to inspire others to build a more just and sustainable future for all of us. There is no merit in saying that a handful of companies are responsible for the largest chunk of carbon emissions, so why do anything individually? The truth is that we live in a consumer society. A company will produce something because we use it. So lobby at every level of political will. Lobbying works, and you don't need a lot of money to be effective, though it does help to educate yourself on effective tactics that you can use every day. Let us resolve to not succumb to despair or inaction in the face of the challenges that confront us. Instead, let us draw inspiration from the lives and works of literary giants like Faiz and Shelley and many, many others who have used their voices to create a world that is worthy of our hopes and dreams. In our final episode of 2024, we've explored the complexities of the global North and global South divide, from its historical roots to its contemporary manifestations. We've seen how our everyday choices, from the clothes we wear to the food we eat, are intricately linked to this global reality. We've also learned that understanding this divide is not just about assigning blame or fueling anxiety or inducing guilt, but about recognizing our interconnectedness and cultivating a deeper awareness of the world around us. The LTB podcast is a space for us to connect these dots, to question our assumptions, to bring that mindset change, and to explore new ways of thinking together. It's a space to cultivate empathy, to foster critical thinking, and to empower ourselves to become agents of change. As we move into the new year, let us carry these conversations with us. Let us continue to ask relevant questions, to challenge the status quo, and remember that even the smallest of actions can have a profound impact. So, this holiday season, let us support local businesses, choose sustainable products as gifts, advocate for policies that prioritize people and planet, and engage as best as we can in meaningful dialogue with those who hold different perspectives than us. If you follow me on Instagram, you have probably seen my weekly story thread, which for fun is called the LTB RecipeLab, where I share my top 5 favorite recipes of that week. A few people who also subscribe to my LTB podcast wrote to me and nudged me to share more of my life with you on the podcast as well. Being new to this, I must admit that I was reluctant at first, but having considered some of the things, I have come to understand that sharing more of myself will not only make this podcast more relatable, but also deepen our connection as a community that we are building here. As I think about the nature of connection and how we build genuine relationships in today's digital world, I can understand that it can feel like we're constantly putting on a professional facade, sharing only the polished, idealistic, and perfect versions of ourselves. But the truth is that authentic connections happen when we are vulnerable, when we share the messy, imperfect parts of ourselves, the part that is human, with unique interests and passions, but also with its own quirks and mistakes. You'll get to know me better, understand my motivations, and see that I'm not just some voice on the internet. I'm a real person with real passions and real interests. And who knows, maybe you'll discover some new things that you love too. Of course, professional content related to entrepreneurship will always be the core of my podcast. I'll continue to bring you insightful discussions as explainers as well as conversations with experts on sustainable business practices, introduce new concepts, and talk about upcoming regulations and policies, among many other topics. So, starting today, I'll be weaving in more of my personal life into this podcast, and you'll be hearing about everything from the books that I'm currently reading, the delicious meals I've been cooking and trying, the clothes I'm loving, and maybe even some behind the scene glimpses into my daily life. Beginning today, actually, with what I look for when I have to get a gift for someone I love. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, I focus on gifts that truly enhance happiness because, frankly, those are the kinds of gifts I value and keep with myself the most. I think it's one of four things. I love the gift of an unforgettable experience. So, experiences that create lasting memories, unlike material products that often lose their novelty over time. So, top of my list would be theater tickets or even a candlelight dinner at home with a movie. Next, I would go for gifts that foster learning and development in one way or the other. So, a book is always a great gift. An online course or even a subscription to a meditation app would be a great option in this category. Then, I love personalized gifts that serve as a constant reminder of your special bond with that particular person. So, the perfect example of this kind of gift is the one that I received from my bestest girlfriend this year, where she surprised me with a hand drawn sketch of one of the most precious photos of my life. And finally, charities. I'm most happy to donate to and have someone donate to the charity of my choice or their choice, or even fundraise for a particular occasion. So that wraps up my four go to options for gifting. Of course, I'm not floating on a cloud above the earth where material gifts do not exist or count, but in my case, material gifts are usually memorabilia that I buy on my travels or things that one needs, but definitely something that carries some thought and value. So, some fail proof year round gifts that I love giving would be books, playing cards, a homemade delicacy, or something as simple as a plant. If you know me, you know how big I am on curated lists, ranging from favorite places to eat, movies for every season, favorite cafes, and even personally crafted city guides. So, in the spirit of Christmas, I've curated a little thoughtful gift guide with links for you in the show notes below. So, you can be imaginative with some of these ideas and pin them to your board for the next year as well. So that's it from my side in 2024. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in 2025. Thank you for joining me on this journey. You've been a wonderful audience. In the meantime, you know where we are. You can find us wherever you like to stream your podcasts from the links in the show notes below. Until next year, here's wishing you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a very, very prosperous New Year.